purchasing side, on the purchasing side of it, just note, our purchasing staff is great, and well knowledgeable. And I think we're pretty good at grants. However, there were still things that both of our teams didn't know as it relates to the federal regulations and purchasing. So be cognizant of that. And what method do you need to use? Can you use a local cooperative? Can you not? Can you use an RFP or RFQ? Can you not? So I think it's just make sure that you have an awareness of that, and know what to do moving forward. As it relates, that's kind of the same thing as the procurement. Make sure that the procurement matches those federal regs. So important. Buy America certification requirements. Again, not all grants, in the past have required that. In fact, we have all of these L2s right now that are out from 10 years ago, and that did not obviously require Buy America certification. So I've heard that a lot of the ones moving forward will require that. So just be cognizant of that. As relates to Buy America, we worked very closely with COG, and we're able to determine who that was. However, it did have effect on how many vendors were accessible to us and accessible to our procurement method. So keep that in mind. Those restrictions will limit your pool, right? Energy cost is also, could be a challenge. It's obviously on the city's contract, and we use it there. I say energy cost is a challenge just because from a public relation or marketing standpoint, there was always a question on, because it was 5 years and then it was 3 years, that it would be free to use. So just keep that in mind. While those a lot of the times are requirements of grants like this of a federal nature, you will have to explain that to your audience, whether that's your elected officials or your residents. You'll have to explain that when a federal money is used, more often than not, you will have a time period that you will not be able to charge for that. Again, just something to keep in mind that is a public relations topic that you'll have to address. Site selection was key to us, and we'll talk about that here in a couple slides as it relates to our assessment. But site selection for us, when we first started this grant over a year ago, we really did not have a needs assessment done at the time. So we didn't know where we needed a site and where we didn't. So we went out with our engineering team. Again, that's that interdepartmental team cross teamwork. We went out and looked at different sites. Again, I say that because there are sites that you'll probably have, which you'll have to bore, which will be more expensive. You'll have sites that are not connected to your energy grid in a very easy and cost-effective manner. It could be cost prohibitive. We had some locations that would just be great to use, but were cost prohibitive, right? So I think you need to definitely pay attention to that. And then in addition to that, customer service. So on the back end, find out what type of customer service you want, and whether or not it's covered by the grant. And that would be your back end office type on your actual unit. Do you have a department that they can call? Do you not have a department? Is that something that you need to outsource? Next slide. Needs assessment. So again, we wish we would have had this done, when we applied for the grant, which we didn't, but we learned throughout the process that this would be a really great tool for us moving forward, especially with all of the federal funding coming down. So in January of 2023, staff negotiated with Volta to conduct a citywide needs assessment for electric vehicle charging stations. And that included public and private. In May, Volta presented the results using the Predict EV technology. And then this approach provided for better site selection. In addition to that, it'll show you where they think the best site locations will be. They're not going to tell you, and they didn't tell us what specific type of unit to use. This is really just where would it be good to have a unit if you do decide to go forward with federal funding. At the end, if you have any questions, I know Gerald is on the call as well and can probably answer some of those questions. But we felt like overall this was a great tool for the city and a tool that we can have using forward as we're looking at federal funding. Next slide. Lessons learned. I think these are really important, and probably, the best part of this PowerPoint for you guys is this. What can we do differently in the future, and then what can you guys do differently as well? Partnership with COG and staff is key. They really do know what procurement they're looking for. They really do know the vendors, and they really do know the federal regulations. And so that's key. Interdepartmental team is critical. We talked about that, but it really is kind of underrated. We have a great team that all works together. If you don't, that could present problems. Know your contract capacity. Again, there may be different, if it's installation, if it's customer service, for example, you may have a different department in your city that provides customer service that you could jump on and piggyback off of and use that for your customer service for your charging stations. Procurement is fundamental. Know what type of procurement you're going to use. Make sure it's approved by the federal government. Make sure it's approved by your attorneys. Make sure it's approved by COG attorneys. Make sure it's approved by COG staff. That's your number one goal. Be proactive in site selection. So if you see a site, make sure you go out there, take a look at it. Think of things like ADA compliance. Think of things like, is going to cost a lot to bore? Can I connect to the energy source in a quick and timely manner, or is that going to take longer for my project? And then again, federal requirements and knowledge is very important. Next question, next slide. At this point, I just take any questions. We're happy to be here. We're happy to have one of the very first, if not the first, city-owned, municipally owned fast chargers in the region. It took a lot to get here, and it took a lot of teamwork. But I feel like we're better suited now to go forward in the future and obtain more federal funding because we do know what those lessons are. And really the goal today was just to share with you guys, these are the things we struggled with. And here's our strong suits. So if at all, it could help you guys and troubleshoot your processes, and hopefully you don't run into the same barriers we did. And take any questions that you have. And I know Gerald's on the line. If you have any questions, it's for him.
I have a question. Can you take it back to the slide before best practices? Yes. So in your selection, did you just go out for a bid and then this is the one that just won the bid? How did you end up contacting the different people, and what type of, I guess, if it's the first city-owned fast chargers, are y'all making any kind of a profit from it?
Yeah, great question. Great question. Number one, we did not go out for bid. So with your federal requirements, that's why we say you got to pay attention to that, because required of this was Buy America certification. So as you are looking at that, you have to, okay. So for example, if you were just to put in some L2s and you were using your own money, you could go out for bid, go out for RFP, and it would be as simple as that. We could not do that because, again, Buy America certification process. In addition to that, it was highly recommended by COG staff to use a local cooperative at this time. And I believe, and don't want to speak for COG, but that was really due to the time restraints. So when this federal funding is coming out, it's coming out quickly, it's coming out fast, and it has fast turnarounds, as you know. So with Buy America certification and with the highly recommended from COG to use a local cooperative, that's what we did. We used a local cooperative to do an agreement with FreeWire to obtain the charger. And so that is the mechanism that we used. So is it bidded out? Yeah, it's bidded out by a local cooperative who's already done it. However, it wasn't bidded out specifically by the City of Irving. No, it was bid out. We used a local cooperative. Now, that's why I suggest that when you're doing this, for example, if it was something where they highly recommended an RFP, well, the City of Irving would have moved forward with an RFP. If they recommended a co-op, we're going to move forward with the co-op. They're the holding entity to the funds, right? So that's why you pay close attention to what they want and you work in tandem with COG. In addition to that, no, the City of Irving does not make a profit off of this charging station. It's a good question. In the future, perhaps we may, but as almost every federal funding that you're going to have, at least right now, that's all going to require you to not charge for this. So it has to be publicly accessible. Something else to think about in your site assessment. They have to be able to access it, and they have to be able to access it for free. And so because of that, I can't charge any money for the first 3 years. Now, after those 3 years, that would be a public policy decision on behalf of our mayor and council to look and see, hey, is this something that we want to charge for or not? For example, my L2s I have 10 L2s throughout the City of Irving. located at 3 different sites. Those L2s, when they rolled out of their federal grant, we then proceeded to have a cost share with a customer that provided that customer service for us. So we do charge for all of those. But while it's under a grant, no one's going to be charging for it. Therefore, we won't be making a profit. Did I answer all your questions? I think I did.
So, thank you.
Okay, no problem.
Oh,
Can you put your contact in the chat so that I can give you a call in the future?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And we're here, not just, we're a part of the working group. So that's a great point. We're here moving forward. So if you have any questions, I'll just put it in here. But if you have any questions, definitely reach out to us. We want other people to, benefit from what we did learn. And then also those benefits.
Hey, Melissa, this is Randy Boys. You mentioned the backup battery on the Volta unit, and then that is for the network services, or that is for the charging services?
No, that's for the charging services. So that's for the whole thing. It rolls over. That's so if the power grid loses power, we still have power. It still works.
And it works. Do you know the size of that battery?
I don't have the specs on me. I do have it on my laptop, so we can email out. In fact, that's probably what I'll have Savannah do is email you out. We have a flyer on our boost station, and we can check. I don't think there's any issue because we've already put it in our grant application, right? With you guys having the flyer from FreeWire. And then that way, and I think it's on their website anyway, I believe. So we'll send that out to everybody and you guys can see all the details and specs of the FreeWire. Again, that's not the only charging station, but we were limited as it relates to the Buy America certification. That really tied our hands in this process. I hope that in the future, federal funds don't require that. Because to be quite honest with you, you'd have a bigger pool. Nothing to say wrong with FreeWire. We've so far been very happy. We've just started, so we don't know. But you would have a bigger pool, to be honest with you. So we'll email that out to you.
What kind of usage are you seeing in terms of, users using the station as a percentage of like available uptime?
Great question. We just started rolling on the 31st. So I really can't give you, we're about 17 days in. I really can't give you an accurate assessment. We've had a couple different people ask for that. So I think we're going to produce some type of packet whenever we have a good snapshot. I will tell you, and it's kind of a funny joke, is that when I was out there with our installation team, going over some stuff, it wasn't even installed yet fully. And this was at the end of July. And somebody was already pulling up asking if they could plug in. And I'm like, no, we're not ready yet. So I think the usage, I'm anticipating the usage to be pretty good. But we really just don't have a snapshot of it yet. We haven't even been up a full month.
Melissa, I just wanted to mention, you will be able to start charging a fee after August 31st of next year.
Oh, okay. We were
Yeah.
under the impression 3 years.
Yeah, it's just one. Yeah.
We just got some good news there. So thank you. So I retract my previous statement. After a year, it'll be a public policy decision by the city, by the mayor and the city council. Good news. Okay.
We just went out for a site visit to look at it. It's beautiful, by the way. And the display on it is pretty amazing.
Yeah.
It's a touch screen and it shows you all the models that can charge there. It has 2 different types of connectors, the CHAdeMO and the CCS for the DC fast. I have a plug-in hybrid. I was not able to plug in, because my car will not handle a DC fast charger, but
and
it also has an indicator on how much, it said 94%. I guess it was talking about the battery that's in the machine, in the charger. It was at 94%. So it also has a little indicator for that as well.
Yeah, we liked that because that way we could keep an eye on it.
Just to jump in, JP Walton from the town of Flower Mound. That's something we've heard as a policy that our council has been concerned mainly about the electricity costs and not being able to recoup those costs and, kind of subsidizing that. So that's
Yeah.
very interesting, Amy, that you said that, because that's been our barrier to doing this, is those ongoing electricity costs and the unknown of who's going to use it, how much is that, et cetera. So that's good to hear that we can start recouping those funds per use.
I wanted to mention the charger needing to be publicly accessible was a federal requirement. The free for a year, I believe, was a COG requirement.
Oh, okay, thank you for the clarification. We kind of lump all y'all, we like to play by the rules, so we lump all the rules together. And we just make sure we play by them.
Jared, correct me if I'm wrong on that, because he was really involved in the COG
No,
project.
I believe that's correct. That was due to our own program income requirements. So other federal programs may not require them to be free, so you'll be able to recoup that cost.
I'm going to possibly lean out over my skis and make a comment here. This is from an Encore perspective, Randy Boys, regarding those costs. The fact that you can bake into the procurement, and you can do this from the federal ones as well. NEVI, for example, does this for a handful of years. Those initial costs to potentially the user is important, but you've got to parallel that with your plan to make sure that people are using it. So communicating during that period before you transition over to the your own municipality's costs. The costs in those out years, this could either be a problem or a huge moneymaker. If you've got your volume at 20-30% or higher or something like that for use, that thing can be, just a gravy train. If it's used only infrequently, you're going to pay, unfortunately, Encore's delivery cost, whether it's used one 15-minute period of the month or all month long. So, just be careful that, it's your facilities people know these things, how you site them, whether or not it's a little island with its own meter as opposed to a site that's got a load already. These are important factors as you start looking at your out year costs on the thing. So we're happy to talk to you about it.
Thank you for sharing.
Just to jump in here, I had a question regarding the Buy America requirements, and it might be because the procurement process started much earlier, obviously a year ago, but there are currently waivers for the Buy America program until July 1st of 2024, if I'm not mistaken, unless it's different for local governments.
You're correct. This is due to it started. Oh, yeah, thanks, Melissa. It started earlier before the Buy America waivers were released.
Okay.
So yeah, now it would be a little different. There are waivers available until,
Okay.
like you said, July.
I was going to let COG jump into that because we were part of the commentary as it relates to the City of Irving submitted comments on the Buy America certification waiver process. Unfortunately, since this was done when it was done, there was no waiver at the time.
Thank you.
Melissa, there was another question in the chat from Hannah. What type of service maintenance plan is in place for backup batteries to ensure they're always effective?
Very good question. We have a warranty that we contractually negotiated with FreeWire, and then we also extended that warranty, and so that covers the entire unit, and so including the battery. So that's what we negotiated. And that's a very good question. I mean, ensure that you have a warranty, and I always encourage people to get an extended warranty if possible through whatever vendor they're using. Any other questions?
Any other questions for Melissa and City of Irving's efforts here?
I see there are more. I'm sorry, I'm trying to go through the chat real quick. There are many more Buy America compliant units in the market today. We would love to hear about that, Sean. We would. You want to get offline and tell us about that? Unfortunately, when we did this, there really weren't, I would say saying that there's a handful would have been an overestimate at that juncture in the market. In addition to that, some of your major manufacturers and EV chargers, for example, Blink, things like that, that are service providers that also do charging units, they were not Buy America certified at the time. So even people we had contracts with at the time didn't even have Buy America certification. So again, with the waiver being possible, I'm not sure the legal restraints to that and who can do that and what federal funding that matches with. But at the time, I think there were less than 5 Buy America compliant companies.
Yeah, and I'll just step in there for a second, Melissa. And yeah, I think the landscape has changed quite a bit the last 12 months. Obviously, when there's a Buy American compliant requirement, companies sort of react to that. So we are seeing in the market a lot more companies who are trying to achieve that, bringing manufacture here online in the U.S. And whether it's kind of compliant today or compliant in 6 months or 12 months. They are making those moves now. So I would say from where you probably only had a handful before, that number has jumped, probably, 3 or 4 fold at this point. And I would say anyone who's a major player in the space will certainly be offering a Buy America compliant unit in the short term. So I think it's a great point that you brought up. And I think it's a challenge for everyone in the industry to kind of make sure they're researching these things, but I would definitely ask your provider about it because I think there's a lot more options out there now for sure.
Yeah, that's great to hear. That is great to hear. I think there was another question when I was going through the chat.
Yes, it was about stations to swap batteries out, to keep vehicles going, especially like in a business that can't really afford downtime, to recharge. They just need to swap it out and go. Jared, I believe, did respond, but I just wanted to mention if we, from time to time, we apply for federal funding, as was the case with this, EV charging station call for projects. This was federal highway money. And I think having battery swap out stations, is an excellent thing to fund because it can be used by private and public agencies and companies. But the federal funding would have to allow it would be the issue. So if the federal funding would allow that, we would definitely, incorporate that into our call for projects as an eligible fundable activity.
Would it be at all, and I think that's a good thing to look at. I mean, for us, our L2s are not going to swap out. We don't have backup batteries, so it's really only our fast charger to be clear that has a backup battery. I did see on here, there was a comment, revitalized charging solutions out of Fort Worth. There you go, is Buy America certified. Is there a possibility for this working group that we could get? And this is, I guess, a question for Jared, Amy, and Jocelyn, a list of Buy America certified vendors, since it is growing. When we did ours, we had to do our own due diligence, and it was, quite frankly, very difficult, even to find the ones that were. And if the market is growing, is that something that y'all could have on hand, or at least look into, so that we could have a list? So as we're doing more federal funding, and again, I get maybe you might not be able to legally, but is that possible? Something that you could have a list of, where there's almost just like a little, not database, I don't want to go that far, but just a list for the working group. So as we're going out looking for federal funding, we can have that as a guiding document.
Definitely, that would be very helpful to you guys. I think what we need to do is do some research to see if there is one that's existing. Of course, that list is going to change constantly and grow, over the coming, months and years, because it is it's going to, those waivers are going to phase out.
Yeah.
So let us do some research and see if there is a list out there that someone is maintaining.
Here in
Because-
text list maybe. And their TxDOT's, to their credit, their website has grown tremendously in the last year, especially as their EV charging station plan has been put out there and everything. So I do know their website is growing. So maybe that is something else that would be beneficial to the group. They didn't have that plan out when we did this procurement. So again, we didn't need a list because there was less than 5 and they were pretty well known. So, but maybe as the market grows, that might be something else. Is there any other questions for us? And again, it's not a one-time at all. If you guys have any questions, definitely reach out to myself or Savannah, and we can answer your guys' questions. If there's nothing else, thank you so much for having us. We appreciate being part of the working group, and we were glad to present today. And again, if there's any other questions, just reach out to us and we can, thank you, Anna. And if there's any other questions, just let us know. Happy to help.
Thanks, Melissa. Thanks for presenting that great presentation. Great to see that you're able to bring the project to the finish line on such a short timeline. So we're excited about that. We have a few minutes left. Any other thoughts here on the working group? Ideas for presentations for next month? Anything else that y'all would like to discuss while I have some time here?
I got a question. Does any of the cities on here have a, are you still there?
Yes, we're all here.
Okay, my screen went blank. Does any of the cities on here have a ordinance or a comprehensive plan as to how they plan to bring forth the charging stations?
I'll just jump on real quick and say that we don't have an ordinance about charging stations. However, we do have a citywide needs assessment that we conducted with the help of Volta. And they did a citywide needs assessment, both public and private, for suggested locations for those EV charging stations. And we have no problem in addressing any questions on that or providing you information for Volta or their presentation.
Okay, how would I get with you to get that information? That
If it's really up to Jared and how they want us to communicate that, but Savannah can email Jared a copy of the PowerPoint that they presented to our council this past year. So you can kind of take a peek at that, and then
that would be wonderful.
Has their information on it. Absolutely.
That would be wonderful.
And we highly encourage everybody to do a needs assessment. In fact, we wish we would have done one before we actually did it. So I think it's a great tool.
Yeah, hey, this is Gerald from Volta. Just didn't want to interrupt the flow of the conversation, but thanks, Melissa, for the comments, and happy to discuss a needs assessment with any of the cities on the call.
Thanks, Gerald. Any other comments you want to provide before we wrap up here? Any other thoughts on the working group? Thoughts on Melissa's presentation? All right, well, last call here for any thoughts, but I hope this was helpful to y'all. Please let us know if you have any ideas for next month's presentation, anything you'd like to see us discuss, talk about, just an idea of something you'd like to have discussed and you don't necessarily have a presenter in mind. That'd be great feedback for us. But thank you all for your responses to our polls earlier. We'll definitely take that feedback as well. And thanks for responding to the initial survey Justin sent out. Thank you all for joining today.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Bye, everybody. Thank you.
Goodbye.
Thank you all.